Well, welcome to the show, Jake. Excited to have you on. We're just discussing off air. I've had a little bit to do with you guys over the journey, so it's fantastic to have you on and go through. Well, for starters, I'd love to go through what you do, your role with leading teams, and sort of what maybe a bit of an overview for listeners of what leading teams is about for those who don't know at this point.
Yeah, no worries, James. So I was actually talking to a teammate of mine this morning, Tim Ferguson, who did episode 7. So
Right.
and so I briefly had a bit of a listen. So I guess for those that want a bit more context, they can go back and listen to episode 7 if you want. But so yeah, as you just said, Dan. So I guess my background, I'm zooming in from Ballarat this morning. So I born and bred here and studied at university here and played a bit of VFL footy here at North Ballarat back in the day. So that was a fair while ago now, but and that was sort of how I came across leading teams. It was Athlete Development Australia before it was leading teams. So we had a series of athletes, about 180 all up. We used to go around and basically, do some programs in schools and around schools and some jails and those sort of things. And I guess that was sort of how I sort of cut my teeth in terms of this space and facilitation. So it was essentially working with teams to help them to improve their performance. So that was the origins of the model. And I guess everyone that has a bit of an understanding of leading teams, co-founded by Ray McLean, who was an education officer in the Air Force, and came up with the model, which is the one that we still use now with every team and every client that we work with. So it's really around the dynamics and the team and how they're performing, the relationships in the team, what behaviours they agree on, and then how they talk to each other. So that's essentially the what we do at leading teams.
Perfect. I'd like to talk a bit about sort of the team culture and what that means for you guys. Could you give us a brief run through of what that means to you within your organisation and how that sort of relates to community football up to sort of state league football and what that could mean for coaches listening in on this call?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been using it for the last month. So Simon Fletcher, who for the listeners might remember, Fletch played with Richmond and Carlton and is one of our facilitators. We were having a chat a while ago, and part of our sort of training and quality, he's part of our training and quality team, and he read an article a number of years ago which defines culture, I think, the best that I've heard it. So culture is the behaviour or attitude people unconsciously adopt in order to fit in. And so what we want to do is, like, you can't not have a culture. You've got one. Is it the one you want?
Yeah.
And so I guess that's the bit that I'd ask any of the coaches out there, is like, okay, is that the culture that we actually want? And then if it is, great, keep doing what you're doing. And if it's not, then you have to look at it and change it and look at who are the people that are either helping you, that are on board and they're bought into team, and look at the ones that either aren't. And that's where the genuine conversations come in and really agreeing around what your non-negotiables are around behaviour, which helps people to behave their way in or behave their way out.
Silly question, maybe a real
Silly
maybe
question, mate. No, yeah.
bit of an 8-year-old question, but what are the benefits of having a great culture? Like, if you're sitting here listening now, what were the benefits of having a great culture and investing time and trying to improve that from a football coaching perspective?
Oh, well, it's interesting, isn't it? It is a good question. It's the benefits of having a great culture would be, the first part of it would be that you want to actually be there.
Yep.
So I think
Which is pretty big, just quietly.
which is, yeah. So you're actually choosing
Yep.
to spend your energy and effort in a place that's trying to achieve something. So whether that be a footy team or your work or wherever it is, but and I actually fundamentally believe people either do two things: they come to work or they go to a footy team to work for the leader or work against the leader.
Yep.
So if that's a reflection of the culture that you create and that the leaders create. So and again, if you go fundamentally how it impacts performance. So if you've got a great culture, it's been widely documented. That drives behaviour, drives performance, And the more that we talk about it, the more that we understand it. I still find it fascinating. I think even at community sport, and there's some of the coaches that I've had a little bit of to doing with since I finished sort of coaching myself only last year. But they've got tactics and which is great, and then they've got some systems, and which is also you need those, and then I've got video analysis, and we need those, we need that. And then you sort of start talking about what's it feel like at training? What's it feel like after a game when you lose? What do the leaders do around driving the standards? So I guess essentially that's what our model helps teams and leaders to do, is to diversify leadership capacity and to help people take ownership of the culture that they want.
It's really interesting. And talking about, I guess, getting that, I guess, buy-in from the group of what the culture wants to be at a club. But there's the term I'm sure you've coming across. I see it a lot. It seems to be out of America at the moment with that quiet quitting that's sort of happening in the workforce. And I guess that would be a negative side effect of having a poor culture or a poor buy-in from your team members. And I guess for listeners, they're sort of describing that as employees who are showing up to their job and just doing enough to get by, but not doing anything extra, just to hold their job sort of situation. And they're calling that sort of quiet quitting, which has sort of been a bit of a new thing coming in, I guess, since COVID. I think they're sort of referring it to sort of amplified that a lot.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you hit the nail on the head there, and you can say it however it is, but at the end of the day, it's either I want to be there or I don't want to be there, which is a reflection of the culture which everyone's responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anyone listening in can understand that about when you want to be there, you do go the extra, doing the extra things, in football terms, doing the extra training, looking after the club. And the simple fact is that the rewards come from that with, I guess if you're in a performance environment, the results on field will really flow from that, more commitment to training and doing the extra things and just overall putting in more effort. Do you think, just switching across more to sort of high performing team and how that sort of fits in amongst that? So when you've got a team and in a football space, we've got 18 on the field at one time, and trying to get 18 players together to perform at a high level, just walk us through what sort of work you guys do in terms of making that happen for football clubs. I know you guys do a lot at the AFL level, but I guess sort of filtering down state and local level.
Well, I think when you just said that at the 18, I think it's so much more than the 18 on the park. And so great teams have great teammates. We fundamentally believe that. So, and I guess the squad makes a great team. So you've got to look at, that old saying. I think my grandfather used to say, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Yep. And
so if you're looking at, how you drive standards and what it feels like when things don't go to plan or when there's conflict within the team, it really comes down to the squad making it a great team. So how challenging it is to training, what are the standards that you're accepting, all those sort of things that essentially makes up whether the place is high performing or not. And again, it's not the world according to leading teams or according to any facilitators. It's really the team defining what are their non-negotiables around behaviour and then holding yourself to that standard. So, I think that's probably it. Like Kylie and I, with my wife, we were watching Steph Curry's story last night on Netflix, and I don't know if you've seen it, James, but it's it's a cracker for any coach. I think if you sort of start to look at the head coach at Davidson College, and there was a pivotal game. Again, I won't spoil it for the listeners, but there's a pivotal game where he calls a timeout. They're getting beaten, well and truly getting beaten. He calls a timeout, and he's smiling in the timeout. And the players are literally head down, and all of a sudden they go, "Why is he smiling? Are we missing something?" And he's just said, no, we're here. We know what it's about. This is exactly why this is why you play. And they came back and won the game. And it was just the power of possibility thinking, which leaders are responsible for.
Yeah.
So, you know, showing unwarranted optimism in the face of adversity when everyone else thinks it's not possible. Great leaders and in great cultures, you still find a way. You still find that way to be a great team when it's tough.
What do you see between the balance of coaches and being leaders of teams, including the assistant coaches, and then your on-field leaders with your captains and vice captains and leadership group outside of that? What's the connection and how that's driving the stands? What do you see as some of the fundamentals of getting that really working at a high level?
Again, just really agreeing on what your non-negotiables are, but not. It's got to come from the group.
Yep.
I think fundamentally that's where I see it, that the coach will have standards, and then, you know, you just ask a simple question like, well, do the players have the same standards, and who's driving those? So I think, you know, to a number of great coaches that we've had to deal with, there's, you know, Chris Fagan probably one that if you sort of go back through the history of when he took the Brisbane Lions gig.
Yep.
And Simon Fletcher's one of our facilitators that's done a lot of work with him there. You know, to try and shift the culture, it's taken a while to do that. And you know, they had to just grab the evidence. So there's plenty of stories about, you know, you might not win the game, but hang on, did we win the quarter, or what did we do there? So, which again, the amount of, and you're involved with the Falcons, so you know there's some amazing stats out there that help us to link behaviour to performance. So I guess that's the other part of it as well, to answer your question, is it's just and it comes back to relationships. So the senior coach relationship with assistant coaches, their relationships with the players.
Yep.
But then the overarching piece is, what are the behaviours that are our non-negotiable that we believe are going to make us a high-performing team, and then holding yourself to account around that.
Could you give us some examples of teams and the different things that they want to achieve or be a part of their culture that might be sort of contrasting, or like, because listeners are probably just thinking it's all about winning, but is there anything else like what are some of the things that you've come across or work with that you can review, share with us?
We had one at the East Point Footy Club, which is a team in the Ballarat Football Netball League.
Yep.
And you know, it was the how we wanted others to see us was united, but within that, it was, you know, how the level of care that you show. So, you know, that's not just on the field. That's, you know, off the field. So, and I do remember, you know, one of our players, you know, was going through a fair bit of mental health stuff, and just the way that I witnessed, and the other players not judge, help support, but also challenge when they needed to, because they had the relationship. And I just remember one day just going like, you know, what have you noticed in the last month of where we've lived these behaviours? And someone said, oh, you know, when we were talking about, and it just helps them to make direct links to, oh yeah, that's the behaviours that we agreed on, and that's us actually living them. And then, you know, if I sort of link that to lucky enough to be involved in a couple of grand final wins, there's, you know, that particular player was at a crossroad where they probably could have just went, oh no, I'm not going to play anymore. Helped us to win a grand final. So I played a pivotal role. And I think if that conversation, you know, the number of those conversations, and they didn't have the relationships, we probably, you know, we mightn't have seen that person play or again.
With your leadership group, your playing leadership group and captains, how do you see the process of choosing them? And do you have any guidelines for listeners about how they might think about this, say, for next season, and get themselves set up about what that look like, the timing of it, the size of the group? I always find interesting. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think personally it's fundamentally believing that the follower picks the leader.
Yep.
So as and James, you would have seen this as well, where the senior coach will go, yeah, well, there's our leader right there. So in terms of behaviour and also the way they play the game, they don't have to be the best player. And I see too often that's the mistake that coaches at local level make, is that they go, oh, that's our captain, so we'll just make him the captain. So the process that we use, and I've been through it myself when I played, but also when I've coached, is come up with a really, a selection criteria. So what does it mean to be a great leader here? And literally get the team in small groups, literally go, right, this is what we want to see from the leaders here. And when you do an open vote, so there's lots of different ways you can do it, but everyone can relate to a Brownlow medal vote.
Yep.
So you just say, right, everyone here in the squad, you've got to pick the leader, not the captain. So firstly, you just get a list of names, so that comes from everyone. So James, you've got 3 votes and a 2 vote and a 1 vote. Jake, I've got 3, 2, 1.
Yep.
Put them up on the whiteboard in front of everyone. What do we notice now? And then you'll get a bit of you'll get 5 or 6 or some, depending on the leadership capacity. I mean, I've been doing it with one of the teams that I was working with, and they had 4 leaders, really solid 4 leaders, and then there was a big gap between the next. And they said, oh, that's great, we've got 4 leaders. I said, yep, so what does that mean next? It's like, yeah, we're going to have to build some leadership capacity in the rest of the group, because I don't think it comes back to, I mean, Ray when I first bumped into him, so he's had that theory that you, in a footy team especially, should have 7 high-performing leaders, 7 really solid leaders.
Yeah, okay, yep.
So, but I think, yeah, fundamentally it comes down to the follower picks the leader.
It's interesting, just to, diving in a couple of your processes there, because I know listeners always love the details. What are your thoughts around, so you have everyone, you got your 30 players, let's say you got 30 players in your squad, we'll go 40 players, and you're all sitting there and you're doing your 3, 2, 1.
Yep.
And you get the results come out that you've got one guy leading, let's say the total, but you've got another player, say second place, who's got more 3 votes. Where do you sit with that sort of stuff?
Again, so that's where
a bit of a detailed question, but yeah.
No, it's not a hard question at all. It's you just throw it out to the leadership team.
Yep.
You say, we're not picking the captain here, we're picking the leadership team.
Yep.
So then if you've got a really clear criteria and say, this is what we want to see from our leaders,
yep.
Then that's 2 bits of data, is you say, this potentially is, in the eyes of some, they think this person is one of our best leaders. Now, there's 2 parts to that, is the number of votes and then the number of people who voted for them. So, I mean, we do that at leading teams, where we award the person who lives our behaviours the best. So we call that the Sally McLean medal. So there's a number of series ways of how you might do that. But, if you do it with a vote, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and within that there's feedback. So why did you pick James?
Yeah. And
that for me, I think sometimes when I've seen other coaches, even at AFL level, do it, and they just put the names in a hat and just, I'll collate the data. Fundamentally, you're missing out on the players giving each other feedback.
Yeah.
Why would I want you to lead us? It's great feedback for a leader to be able to hear that from their peers. And then also, if I've got aspirations to do it and I'm not there, I should feel, oh, geez, hang on, I want to get there. So what could I do to improve?
And then being in that space where you are hearing that sort of information would really help guide you, I guess, as a player, if you have aspirations of getting to that point.
I think go 2 ways, mate. As you've seen, like receiving feedback is a skill.
Yep.
And it's what you do with it next. So, you might hear something that you don't want to hear, and then you've got to go, geez, righto, there might be something in this. Got 3 players that think I'm in the leadership group, but the rest of the squad didn't have me in a vote. So, I've got relationships with a small part of the squad. And it's really about, that we talk about the key centres of influence and their ability to influence the weight of numbers. So that's the part of it. So if you're looking at a leadership group, you should be able to have influence over the squad. So everyone in the squad should have 1 or 2 or even 3 people that they voted for that's in the leadership team.
Yeah.
You
just mentioned feedback is almost a skill to be able to utilize it well. Walk us through that and some tips for people who in this off season are probably going to get a lot of feedback. Usually that happens at the end of the season. You get a bit of feedback before you go away on your break.
Yeah.
What is a good mindset, and what's a good way to maximize the feedback that you receive as a coach or as a player, whenever you get it?
Well, firstly, I think what you said just then is it can be fundamentally flawed if you're thinking at the end of the season, I'm going to get some feedback.
Yeah.
So for me, in great teams, it's not seen as an event, or even in the corporate world where it came from my understanding it from the book that I read around performance review, is that we wait till this performance review process for me to get the feedback that I needed to hear 6 months ago. And so I think that's the other part of it. So being open to feedback, so that it's not seen as an event, and it's not seen as the end of the year, or I'm going to get these are going to be my things. But it should be when you need to have the conversations. And now I know that that's great in theory, but if you're missing those opportunities to help your teammates improve, then and you're waiting to the end of the year, then I think that's you're missing opportunities to get them to improve, but also to practice the skills of giving feedback, right place, right time, right message. So I think that's the other part of it. I reckon that from experience is don't wait for it to be an event.
Yeah, it's interesting. I listen occasionally. There's a guy named Dave Ramsey. You might have heard of him. He's in the States. I find him pretty entertaining, but he talks more sort of finance stuff. But he talks about around his business, which is a big business now, about they don't have those meetings, exactly what you've spoken about. They don't have sit downs. They just say it as it is and give that honest feedback as they work through. And everyone within his organization, he was saying that they know exactly where they stand and what's working, what's not, and how they are within the organization, and it's just that was spot on exactly what you said.
Well, the easiest way, and it had it with the group yesterday, was literally, and it's our model, but so build your relationships so that they are strong enough to withstand a genuine conversation around behaviour or performance. Now, that seems really simple, doesn't it? But then it's the doing, and it's the prioritizing it, and the other part of it is around the behavior or performance. You have to have some agreement around the non-negotiables, the behavior you want to see, and then as leaders, you reward, model, and challenge that behavior. It's fundamentally very simple, but it's then every time, do you reward people when they do it? Do you model it? Do you actually do it? And do you challenge or confront it when you don't see it? So I guess that's the other part of it. They're just a couple of really simple things. But and if you want to, came from Graham Winter's book, The Man Who Cured the Performance Review. And I think if you're an aspiring coach, or if you're into leadership, there's a whole chapter around how to create a feedback culture, and so it is linking to those two things we were talking about before. And if you want to encourage feedback, you receive it, you review it, and then you respond accordingly. And if you want to discourage feedback, you resist it, you react, and then you ultimately reject what's being said. So it's a great book, and I would reference that a lot when working with lots of different teams.
Do you have any? You mentioned a couple of things, but is there any other sort of common coaching mistakes that you've seen throughout your journey as being involved in football, and obviously with your work you're doing now?
Yes, I see it a fair bit that it's it's sort of, I'm trying to say it. So it's not seeing relationships as the pivotal point around performance. So it's saying that I value relationships, but not actually doing it.
Yep.
And I think that's fundamentally, I've seen plenty of people that say, yeah, I'm into relationships and my relationships are great. And then when push comes to shove, they're not as strong as what they thought they were. And it's not the perception of James, you and I have met before. Have we actually given each other feedback? Can I tell you how you make me feel? That is fundamentally, that takes, you've got to prioritize the relationship. You've got to invest in it. You've got to acknowledge when you make mistakes, all those sort of things, which fundamentally comes back to the culture that you want to create.
Yeah, perfect. Do you have any, there's a question I asked nearly all guests, but is there some key principles that you could share that help with better and more consistent football performance?
It might be really simple, but I just think consistency comes from agreeing on what behaviours are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So, and again, you can do that individually. So, if you're sitting there and the coach might not be into agreeing on behaviours, as a player, I can still go through the process. So, what's the truth that I've accepted about me? What's the truth that others have accepted about me? And how I can check that is I might go and ask 5 or 6 or 7 people that I really value their opinion. And we use basic things like, just give us 3 words to describe me, or how am I as a player or a person. 3 words to describe me. What might you ask me to consider to stop, start, and keep doing? It's a really simple thing. Or you might say, what do you love about having me on the team? What are my strengths? And what's 1 or 2 things that I could improve on?
Yeah.
And if you ask 5 or 6 people that you really value, especially your peers, and you look at the themes that they give you, like I remember I've been playing in a band for 20 years and my mates would give me feedback about being late. We'd say, we're going to drive to Sorrento. We'd catch the barge. They knew that if Jake's late, we're going to miss the barge. And I remember Chris one day saying, what time are we leaving? And I said, what do you reckon? 12 o'clock? He said, is that 12 o'clock Jake time or 12 o'clock actually 12 o'clock? Yeah. And I went, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you're going to be late, aren't you? So how about we say 11:30 for 12 o'clock? And I went, geez, this is a problem. Mm-hmm. So I think they're just, you start to look at that and go, right, had he not have said that, I probably just would have
continued on.
I wouldn't value it as much. I used to say I value my and people's time, but I was a bit loose around it. So I think if you're not giving, you don't have the relationship where you don't have that conversation, I'm none the wiser.
In the AFL, is there a coach that you really admire and see as successful, and why is it that you see them as successful?
Geez, there's a few. I met 2005. I was playing footy at Wangaratta Magpies, and John Henry was our coach, and our assistant coach was Jason Lappin. So some people know Matty Lappin and the Lappins. So and we rocked up to training one night, and John said, I just want to introduce you to Brett Ratton. Ratts is going to take us through some drills tonight. And just awesome, great bloke. Came up for dinner that night, sat next to him, I was really interested. And I guess he's one that sits in my head where, a couple of years ago, even before I started leading teams, I was really interested in learning as much as I could, similar to you, James. You want to go and catch up with people and have coffee and talk to them and educate yourself. And I had a mate who was working at Hawthorn at the time and got introduced to Andrew Russell. And Andrew said, look, you can come and you can do a day a week if you want. You just come into the club. I'll show you around. I'll show you what I do. There's no guarantee I'm going to give you a job or anything. I said, mate, I don't want that. I just want to learn. And I remember when I first walked in the lift, as you walk into the Hawthorn Footy Club, it literally says, embrace Hawthorn and it will embrace you. I thought, oh, that's a really cool little thing. So anyway, I walked in and I thought, oh yeah, I wonder, see how I go. No one's really going to know who I am. And walked in, and Brett Ratton walks up and goes, "G'day, mate. How you going? What are you doing here?" And I just went, "What? How does he remember me?" And he was just a really welcoming, great human being. And I think, I was only talking to Ray the other day, and everyone would know about what role he's played with North Melbourne, why Alistair was away from the club. And I think there was a journalist that asked Rats a while ago, geez, you've had a few things happen in your career. Anyone would probably, any lesser person would have given it up. And his response was unbelievable. He just said, "Well, I've got kids, and I want to model behaviours to those kids now. Well, my kids, so if I had to quit, what does that show them?"
Yeah.
And I just think fundamentally, no one asked another question after that, because it just put everyone in their place to start to reflect and go, what behaviours do I model to the key people in my life?
Mm.
So he's one, and there's a lot of others that I've been really fortunate enough to bump and learn off. But that's one that probably he comes to mind a fair bit.
It's actually, I love that from what you talked about with Rats there. I was actually just randomly, I'm just pulling up now. I was just, as you do, I was following Tom Brady on Instagram, and just a little post come up, but it was still on the similar lines. It just reminded me of it. And was the quote, the quote that he's living by a little bit at the moment. This is the retired NFL legend, for those who've been living under a rock for the last 20 years. The life you lead is the lesson you teach. And it's one of his quotes he's just wrote. And I just thought that's really cool. It's probably similar to what you just sort of spoken about with Rats and how he's going about his football. That's an amazing story. Is there a player, again, I've got a few of these questions I like to ask a lot of my guests, but is there a player that you've come across that sort of exceeded expectations for what people originally thought they could achieve? And how do they do that? How do they get that extra level out of themselves when most felt that that probably was beyond them?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, I guess I've been involved with footy since I was sort of 12, and then had stopped last year. So at 43, and it's only probably come to the forefront. Now you ask that question, it's actually come to the forefront because I looked on Twitter this morning, and I saw a tweet, or it's not tweet, an X. Hawthorn Footy Club put on Isaac Smith, and literally, so I was really fortunate enough to, and at the time I probably didn't, none of us would have thought he would have had the career he was going to have. He was playing reserves footy at Redan. So I was towards the end of my career. I was played with a fair few mates that I played junior footy with, and VFL footy at Redan Footy Club in Ballarat. And Isaac was actually working with, I've mentioned before, Jason Lappin. So Jason's wife, Kelly. Isaac was working up in New South Wales, and he was moving to Ballarat to come to uni. And it was just a conversation that fortuitous that I'd finished playing at Wang, come back to Ballarat for work. And Kelly said, we know Jake, he plays at Redan, maybe you should come and have a kick. And I remember him rocking up, and skinny kid, was a defensive liability, didn't know how to tackle. I remember playing, he could run, like, obviously clearly that's what he's made his game on, but, some of the deficiencies he had were really deficient. And, he's probably one that jumps to mind. And when you think, there's a picture of down at Caninia Park with not only 3 Hawthorn premierships on the ground at Caninia Park, but also one last year, and then a Norm Smith medal. You just think, Jesus, that's one that I think, it's a tough one to beat that.
When you saw him in those early days, was there anything from his habits or the way he went about his football? Is there anything that you thought stuck out at all that could, be the tip that he's going to go get drafted for starters. Was he 21 or so? He's a bit late, wasn't he? 21 or so when he got picked up by Hawthorn.
So, 2009, played in a premiership at Redan. So he won 2009 and 2010. He played with North Ballarat in the VFL.
Yep.
And the next year he played in a premiership with Hawthorn. So played in 3 premierships in a row in 3 different leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But we did every year in Ballarat, for those that know where Ballarat is, and around Lake Wendouree, we do a 3K time trial, and there was a couple of blokes that were probably rated themselves, and Isaac's first 3K time trial beat everyone by a fair bit.
Yep.
I sort of remember just thinking, and that's where the game's gone. It's how how much ground you can cover. And I just remember just thinking, geez, he can run.
Yeah.
And I guess that history's proven it. And the other part of it for me is he's just a charismatic bloke. Just those that went to uni with him and all of his those mates that sort of saw that. He's just great to be around, and he was a great teammate. So can be a bit of a pain in the backside sometimes, which I know that's probably another trait that people sometimes admire as well. Is you can say those more provocative things when you need to, but he's a bit of a character, and it's great that he's only just recently come out and announced his retirement, and it's been a fair career.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, probably for the last decade, he'd almost be on the team of the decade on a wing, nearly. I reckon, if he wouldn't be far off it. I think for the last 10 years or so, I can't think of too many more wingers who have probably done it better than him.
That's a fair point. So, no.
Amazing. A few more questions for you, Jay. And I just really appreciate your time and having a chat to us today. A couple of books. You mentioned one earlier. Do you have any books or documentaries you might be able to talk to us about that you recommend listeners check out?
Yeah. So I'm sitting. The beauty of sitting in my office, mate. I've got a few sitting here that I've read. So when I first started at leading teams, this was on Ray's reading list, and it's called Too Soon Old, Too Late Smart by Gordon Livingston. I've obviously got a couple of things here I use with different quotes and those sort of things, but that one's I think in leadership, or even just in all the different roles that we play, to be coach, father, wife, friend. There's lots of home truths there that really help me with my leadership philosophy, but also, how I work with lots of different people.
Yep.
The other one I actually got from a mate who I think it's interesting. I'll mention his name without name dropping, but so I was really fortunate enough to have a bit to do with Max Bailey. So Max, for those that don't know, played 48 or 40-odd games. Last game was a premiership with Hawthorn, and went through three knee reconstructions. And I remember when we were sitting down in a coffee shop in Richmond before he went overseas. He basically sort of stopped coaching at Richmond and went overseas to work, went to Tanzania, and he gave me a book. He said, I want you to read this. I think you'll really like it. And it's The Power of Passion and Perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's by Angela Duckworth. And again, there's some great pearls of wisdom there. There's some really cool things in there. But I think it really helped him, in his quest to overcome not one, not two, but 3 knee reconstructions and be the leader and the person that he is today. So that's a great one. And then the other one, James, I don't know how we got this one, but I've got Lucas 10, Gracie's 9, Clem's 3, and I think this is another trait that I've noticed in great leaders and great teammates is that growth mindset.
Yep.
Or having that power of possibility thinking. And so this one's actually, and I've used this with corporate, but I've also used it with my own kids. So it's called Bubblegum Brain.
Yeah, awesome.
It's the power of yet. So I haven't learnt it yet. And so Gracie, when we first read this, she went 5 or 6, and they're really fortunate enough they go to a school where they have little yet bands, and so they come home and they get frustrated because they're not learning something quick enough, and they have to get taught, I haven't learnt it, or I can't do it yet. So that one for me is it's another great reminder of how we can all fall into the trap of having a fixed mindset around something, and again we know we need to learn and grow and adapt and all those sort of things. But that one for me is really simple, but doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah, I love that little bubblegum brain. My kids are 3 and 2, so I'm gonna have to. Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad thing. I could see that, and probably us adults can definitely take a lot out of that one.
Yep.
Final question for you. If I could give you a banner that coaches in this case are going to see day in, day out, what would you write on that banner?
Coaches. Well, probably one that I've got a few, but the one that probably sticks to mind is so I 21 was playing VFL, played on a fellow Matthew Phoebe, who was playing for Melbourne at the time, and I ran through the middle of the Sandringham ground, and basically my knee just collapsed, and had a knee reconstruction at 21, and I remember Mum picked me up from the surgeons. Had it done, come back, had to drop my insurance forms off at the footy club at North Ballarat here, and Jared Fitzgerald, who's would be great on your podcast if you haven't interviewed Fitzy, but who had a pretty significant impact on my sort of career as well. He had to go to another meeting, so he waved me in the back of the car. Jake, good luck with your recovery. If you need anything, let me know. But he sort of had to toddle off. And Craig Grime, who's one of the other co-founders of Leading Teams, who I didn't really know that well at the time, but I knew, he just sort of opened the back door of my mum's old XF Falcon Fairmont gear with the velour seats, and just shimmied my leg over and the pillow, and just sat down and proceeded to have a conversation. And I'll never forget it. At the end of it, very, very, very influential person, highly skilled facilitator, obviously, and he got me to agree on a banner, or it was an affirmation at the time. I didn't know what it was, but it was just get up and train.
Yeah.
And I still use it now. Like I still go to the gym, I still get up and I still train. And so training can sometimes be, I need to learn something new, or it might be, it doesn't have to physically be, I need to train. I might need to, even in our game, it's reading a book, or it's listening to a podcast, or it's having a conversation with someone to get feedback, so that's training. So, doing everything that you do in training, so that when you're in the game, it becomes autonomous.
Fantastic there, Jake. Well, really appreciate your time, and hopefully listeners, I'm sure they will get a lot out of it, particularly when we're discussing through team culture and high performance, and having a glimpse into the world of what you do. If anyone wants to reach out and contact you or Leading Teams, what's the best way to go about it?
Yeah, it's our website, mate. It's www.leadingteam.net.au. So that's probably the best way. And there's, all of our facilitators. We're obviously spread across Australia. And so it doesn't matter where you are, we'll be able to help you out or have a chat around high performance and team culture.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll be able to put a link up on the show notes when we publish this episode. So yeah, thanks again, and all the best for the rest of the year. And
Thanks,
I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Cheers, James. Thanks for having us, mate.